Okay, folks, we're going to explain the meaning of survival of the fittest today. And I've been wanting to do this one for a while, ever since I really came to understand just what is meant by this term, especially what is meant by the term the fittest. And the opportunity to explain this came up yesterday on Twitter when the Twitter account Orwell and Good posted a meme on dogs, and the meme goes something like this. You have dogs of 300 years ago, these fierce, feral, blood-stained hunter-gatherer beasts with furry abs and blood-stained paws. And then you have the dogs of today, who are just, the little lapdog pets of humans. So dogs of 300 years ago, I killed all the wolves and ate the liver of a fox that wanted to steal food from our home. Meanwhile, dogs now, you changed my food and now I have diarrhea. Okay, so this is a really cute meme talking about how dogs were these amazingly majestic creatures who, were things to be feared and reckoned with by both humans, I presume, and the animal kingdom. And now they're just these cute little pets. But there's an implication in this meme here that I don't think is entirely correct, because what we're kind of saying is, wouldn't it be better in a way if dogs now were more like the dogs of 300 years ago? And the implication is that in the process of evolution that took dogs from 300 years ago to being the dogs of today, that the dogs of 300 years ago, they evolved from this fittest state into what is now an unfit state. And it's all gauged around the fact that they're no longer the blood-stained hunter-gatherers with amazing abs that they used to be. And now they're just these pretty little pets. But is that really an accurate depiction of what fittest means in the context of evolution? So we have to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be the fittest? And so let's take a look at what it does not mean first. And what it doesn't mean is whoever is strongest, whoever's fastest, whoever's smartest, whoever's biggest, whoever hunts, thinks, looks, or even mates better. Fittest doesn't mean any of these things. What it means is whoever possesses the fittest qualities, that is, those qualities best fitted to the present environment at the present time. Now let me give you an example of that, and let's go back to our two kinds of dogs. Let's say that instead of, this being dogs 300 years ago versus dogs of today, let's say that these are two different species of dog existing at the same time. And let's say that nearby to the dogs who are on the beta orbiter type dogs, as opposed to the alpha brutes on the left, there is this cave, and this cave is big enough for a beta orbiter to get through, but it's not big enough for an alpha brute to get through. Now let's also say there is a planet-killing comet on the way. Well, that's an emergency, because now it looks like the whole world of dogdom is going to get wiped out unless you can get into the cave for shelter. So the beta orbiter escapes into the cave, whereas the alpha dog realizes he's completely screwed because he's too big to fit into the cave. Cataclysm results, and then when all the smoke clears, you've got a big pile of ashes where the alpha dogs used to be. And now you've just got the beta dogs and the pile of ashes. So now we have to ask ourselves, between these two varieties of dog, which one was the fittest? Well, clearly the dogs, the alpha brutes that got reduced to a pile of ashes, was unfit for the circumstances that presented itself. Whereas the beta orbiters here turned out to be the fittest. And that's what survival of the fittest means. It means who was the best fit for the circumstances that arose, even as these dogs fit into the cave, whereas the The alpha dogs did not. So let's take a look with this new understanding of fittest, understanding that it's whatever qualities you have that make you fit to survive the present state of circumstances that face you, and not just, whoever's exemplary in any particular category. Let's take another look at the 300 years of evolution that dogs underwent. Now, what was the cataclysm, one might say, that drove the alpha dogs to become the beta orbiters? Well, if you guessed humanity, you're right. See, the dogs of 300 years ago were not well suited for human companionship. And so, as humans became the dominant species on planet Earth, dogs had to evolve to meet their needs, so that now when you look at the cute little beta orbiter dogs on the right, you understand that those dogs are the fittest for dealing with humans because, who doesn't love a puppy? Who doesn't love the little puppy? Whereas the alpha dogs on the left might generate an entirely different reaction. So in this case, the alpha dogs on the left are the ones who are unfit for present-day circumstances because humans would never coexist with these brute killers, whereas the dogs on the right are the ones fittest for the circumstances at hand, for a human world. Now, let's say that the circumstances were to change, and now humans are out of the picture. Well, in that case, evolution might actually reverse, so that now the human-dependent dogs on the right are going to evolve back into the alpha brutes on the left, because the circumstances have changed to favor dogs who are capable of fending for themselves rather than coexisting with humans, because humans are now out of the picture. So that's really the way survival of the fittest works. It's not a function of any particular one characteristic to say, if this characteristic goes to 11, then that's obviously the fittest. Sometimes that's just not the case. It just means what makes you the best fit for the present circumstances at hand. And as the circumstances change, what is fittest might change. Now, what are the implications for eugenics? Now, eugenics would be any kind of state-mandated program that controls people's reproduction in an attempt to make the ideal human being. And this has been attempted in the past, and sometimes here in the United States, it's even been attempted. I mean, we tend to think of eugenics as functions of totalitarian governments, but it's also been a very progressive ideal in the United States as well, such that back in the early 1900s, maybe the late 1800s, but mostly I think the early 1900s, there were things like forced sterilization programs in the United States as well as abroad. It was really a heady idea in the minds of scientists and politicians of those days. I think even Margaret Sanger's Planned Parenthood vision was sort of a eugenic vision, in that she wanted to be able to keep the poor and the quote unquote inferior from breeding. So the eugenic impulse has existed in America for a long time, and I have to admit, I've even been tempted to it myself whenever I see one of these kids who's like, he's 10 years old and he's going to Harvard, and I'm thinking, oh my God, why aren't we breeding this kid out? Don't we need geniuses to that degree? But the thing is, eugenics programs that strive to create any kind of fittest humanity possible are doomed to failure by definition, for precisely the definition of fittest that we just created. See, what is fittest is a function of the sum total of all circumstances pertaining to a particular moment in time, and what's fittest now might not be fittest later on. No one can predict what combination of qualities is going to be fittest years, decades, or centuries out into the future. Like we just saw with the comet example. If you don't know right now that there's going to be a comet coming in 20 years, you're not going to be able to breed humanity for that moment in time. You can only understand fittest if you understand what all the circumstances of any particular given moment are, and nobody has that kind of crystal ball. And last but not least, You, in the process of trying to create this perfect humanity, might even unwittingly breed out of existence the very traits humanity might need to survive someday. And one of these things might be, for example, sickle cell anemia, which is a very painful condition that people in Africa occasionally get. And it is thought that sickle cell anemia was actually something that humanity in Africa co-evolved in order to resist malaria, which that was evolving alongside them. And so the sickle cells that people would get in these sickle cell attacks would actually be responses to malaria infections, such that the malaria would have a harder time grafting itself onto the blood cells or being able to take hemoglobin from the blood cells of people with sickle cell anemia. And so what if we got sickle cell anemia completely out of the human population, and then 100 years from now we have this super malaria bug that could be rebuffed by sickle cell anemia? But no, humanity doesn't have that gene anymore, and so all of humanity dies. I mean, that's an extreme example, but at the same time, it could happen. So there's really no way that any kind of eugenics program makes any sense for humanity. It's one thing to try and breed dogs over time to be the best kind of dogs that you need in this present day, because then you have an idea. I mean, you will have an idea of what something that you actually need from a dog. And indeed, if you read Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, you'll note that it was dog breeding and things like that, plant breeding and dog breeding, that led Darwin to his ideas of natural selection and evolution. And said, hey, if humanity can artificially select certain kinds of dog breeds into existence, then what happens if nature, through its sets of random circumstances, were to select things like humanity into existence? So that's something that I'll probably get along into in a later video, because this one I want to keep short. But the idea being is that you really can't try to breed humanity like you breed dogs. You might know what you need in a dog, but you will never know what you need in a human being years or decades out into the future. The only thing that you can really ever gear for is the present, and you don't want to really cut your options off in later years. So anyway, I'm Mike Partika. Thank you for listening to this presentation. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe. And if you want to check out the links in my video description, you will find a link to my Amazon site where you can find the books that I've written. I am looking at publishing a 5th book in the coming days, so be on the lookout for that. I will keep you posted, and I will talk to you later.